It's not the civil magistrate's job, the government's job to regulate or restrict our worship. And so we're freely coming together, peaceful citizens, to worship Christ because he is worthy. In terms of what that means now, I don't really know. The government has obviously turned up the heat on churches, trying to discourage them from gathering together. I think they don't understand that Christians are committed to follow the Lord Jesus Christ regardless of the consequences.
Okay, yeah. And then you had that gathering on June the 6th.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you're under arrest for.
For breaking that.
For disobeying that order, right?
Now, can you tell me how that order actually applies to me?
You were served with it. We're just doing our job, okay? So, and if you hadn't basically broken the order or the rules that are set out right now, I wouldn't be here, right? Do I want to be here? No. Before I put you in the back, we'll just get you put your hands on the side of the car, honey. So nothing sharp, nothing basically at all in your pockets, nothing we need to worry about.
Bye, Daddy.
Bye, guys. Okay.
This is not seeking damages because of the lockdowns being unjust. This is specifically about a wrongful, totally unjustified arrest, totally unjustified imprisonment when both Alberta Health Services and the Calgary Police Service had all the information available and chose to do the wrong thing.
Adam Sos here for Rebel News. Very happy to be joined by the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, John Carpay. Big story today, I think, a story that many people have been waiting for. But before we get into sort of the punitive response that some of the people who endured incarceration, arrests, and all that, the legal action they may be taking against the government, I want to talk a little bit about the recent acquittals that took place. Now, we already spoke about the Ingram decision and sort of made some prognostications about what might happen. Those prognostications have come to fruition, and virtually all the charges remaining against Pastor Tim Stevens and against his church have been acquitted. But how long did this process take? I mean, we're talking about years that people's lives were on hold, right?
Well, the Justice Center filed a statement of claim in December of 2020. So we'd already been experiencing violations of our charter, freedom of association, expression, peaceful assembly, conscience, religion, had already been going on for 9 months. I think that was the first challenge to lockdowns in Canada, certainly in Alberta. And unfortunately, it took 2.5 years before we finally got a ruling. The court was incredibly lenient with the government, gave them 6 months to come up with evidence to justify lockdown measures, which when you've got charter rights and freedoms being violated, that evidence should be produced in a week or two. Yeah. And if the science is all there, it shouldn't be that hard to take a week or two and produce all the science that you are supposedly relying on. In any event, we got a mixed ruling in Ingram. It was positive in that it invalidated all these lockdown measures, leading to the acquittals or staying of charges, rather, of Pastor Tim Stevens, right, Pastor Coates, and so many other Albertans. On the negative side, the judge, without any analysis, without a valid basis, she concluded that the violations of charter rights and freedoms were justified. Yeah. So mixed result.
And that's certainly troubling, because we're talking about, in the case of Pastor Tim Stevens, in the case of many of these pastors, simply opening his doors, welcoming people in, not saying don't wear a mask, not preaching against this, but simply saying, well, we're going to open our doors and invite people in for that multiple brutal arrests, significant time behind bars, all of that. As you mentioned, lots of people didn't get the sort of catharsis that they were hoping for from this victory, because it was basically a technicality. It wasn't saying, they acknowledged that there were fundamental freedoms trampled, but it was fine because of the circumstances. That's not the catharsis, the sort of relief that people wanted. So many people have been asking the question as to whether there will be a remunerative action against these government authorities who locked people up. And Pastor Tim Stevens in our interview yesterday revealed, and I believe it might be one of the first instances of this actually taking place, at least in Alberta here.
Yeah, I think what a lot of Canadians realized in the last few years is that our most fundamental freedoms actually come second place in our Constitution, in our Charter.
Nothing sharp, nothing basically at all in your pockets, nothing we need to worry about.
Bye, Daddy.
So the judge here in Alberta, and also I know other regions in the country like in Ontario, agreed that our fundamental freedoms to assemble, to gather, to worship, that those were in fact, they were impinged, they were violated by the government. But of course that first section of our charter says, the government can suppress our freedoms if it's demonstrably justified. And there is no burden of proof upon Dina Hinshaw or anybody else to justify their decisions. And so that's really what is a shame about all of this is the admission that your rights were violated. However, the government can do that.
You guys are actually coming forward with legal action against this government. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've got a statement of claim here, 14 pages. Plaintiff is Timothy Paul Stevens, and the defendants are Alberta Health Services and Mark Neufeld, the Calgary Police Chief. And then I have two statements of defense from Mark Neufeld and from Alberta Health Services.
So before we get into some of the nitty-gritty details here, I suppose to set the stage for folks out there, this legal action doesn't stem from the most recent acquittals in relation to the Ingram case necessarily, but it goes back to, was it the Rook order? Or what? Can you give us the legal details as to what this extends from?
Well, in a nutshell, Pastor Tim Stevens was wrongfully arrested on May the 16th, supposedly on the basis of a court injunction, but that court injunction applied only to Whistle Stop, Chris Scott, and Glenn Carrott. I may have mispronounced the name, sorry. What happened was Alberta Health Services went into court on May the 6th and secured a court order against Whistle Stop and Chris Scott. And what that means, an injunction enables the police, rather than just giving you a ticket, like a speeding ticket or a ticket for violating a health order, rather than just getting a provincial offense ticket, you can be immediately arrested and handcuffed and jailed because you're in contempt of court. Because what the court has said is that if Whistle Stop or Chris Scott defied the court order, they would get jailed, which is different from getting a ticket.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, the judge, Associate Chief Justice Rook, he added this clause that the injunction should apply to everybody in Alberta, which was wrong at law because injunctions are not supposed to apply to the entire population. So the Justice Centre retained a lawyer. We went to court a week later, May the 13th, and we secured an amendment that took out the words that this order applied to all of Alberta. We notified the Calgary Police, we notified police services across Alberta that they were not entitled to just arrest anybody for breaking a health order. I mean, yes, they could still issue tickets, but they couldn't arrest and jail anybody. So the police were aware, Alberta Health Services were aware. Nevertheless, right thereafter, they go and they arrest Pastor Tim Stevens, and he spends 2 days in jail and then later on 18 days in jail. Just complete disregard for the rule of law, the administration of justice, and disregard for court orders that they were fully aware of, because that change on May the 13th, that came into effect immediately on May the 13th, and they knew it.
Well, and any sort of plausible deniability on behalf of officers does not exist. They were notified. Tim Stevens informed us that he repeatedly told them, no, there's been an amendment. This does not apply to me. They had a clear agenda. I don't know if there was instructions from Mark Neufeld. I don't know what the circumstance was. Perhaps, I mean, giving the benefit of the doubt, there's a complete lack of competence and they just didn't know what to do.
Can you tell me how that order actually applies to me?
You were served with it, and then there was a gathering. One of them basically says it was a gathering. So,
but the order listed Chris Scott and those who worked with him, and I have no association with the Whistle Stop Cafe or anybody who works with them. Do you have the order with you?
But it's anybody. I don't have the actual order with me.
Okay.
Okay. So the investigators that dealt with it have done that, and then I have the order that's basically on just on our CAD, so I don't actually have a printout of it, and then I just have the affidavit that you were actually served. Basically, these are the laws that everyone in Canada basically has agreed to abide by,
Yeah,
right?
but Jason Kenney can have his dinner up in the Sky Palace, and
You know
no one's
what?
coming to his house to take him to jail.
You know what? It's like I said, it has nothing to do with that. I'm dealing with this, right?
And every police officer I talk to, they all say the same thing. I'm just doing my job, just doing my job.
Okay, but
But
like
it's,
every single one of us, like me included, my parents go to church. They've been doing church online. We've basically been abiding by all these orders, things. We don't like them, right? But right now it's the laws that they basically laid out before us.
But this resulted in two of the most brutal arrest videos that I've seen. The one particularly, the second one outside of Pastor Tim Stevens' house with his children crying, that was absolutely gut-wrenching. And then the fact that this peaceful family man was thrown behind bars and spent all that time.
Strip searched.
Yeah, strip search, brutality. It's categorical injustice. So is there hope for justice to come from this?
Well, I hope so. What's really interesting is that the statement of claim talks extensively about how this order was changed from the May 6th order that inappropriately applied to everybody in Alberta, appropriately narrowed down May the 13th. We go through that in the statement of claim, and we talk about the changes and the court proceedings and how there was a new order on May 13th, how it didn't apply to Pastor Tim Stevens. Now, what's really interesting is that, unless I'm reading it wrong, neither the Alberta Health Services Statement of Defense nor the Calgary Police Statement of Defense mentions that change in the order. So maybe they're hoping the judge is not going to notice all of that content from the statement of claim. I find it bizarre. I mean, if I was the lawyer acting for these guys, I would make some effort to try to address that.
Yeah.
And they're silent on it. It's chirping crickets.
Yeah. Maybe if they don't put a goalie in the net, no one will notice the net is there. Something like that. I don't know. No, the concern here for folks, I suppose, would be obviously this seems pretty open and shut. It seems like the court clearly said it didn't apply, but they went ahead and did it anyways. They were given sufficient notice. They can't really say that there was like a level of plausible deniability here. Can the courts? Can they just decide, notwithstanding, or do something similar to the Ingram case, or is this more open and shut criminal civil law?
Well, I've often said, I'll say it again, anybody who makes a prediction about a court outcome is a fool. You do not know. Nobody, you can speculate all you like. Certainly, to me, it seems like an open shut case, but I'm biased.
Yeah.
I know that Tim Stevens was treated horrifically, and there's a grave injustice here. That's my opinion, but I won't make any predictions about this other than saying that Tim Stevens has a very strong claim because Alberta Health Services and the police, both of whom have legal departments. It's not like they're Joe Blow that is just ignorant of the law. They have their legal departments, and nevertheless, they went and they blatantly violated a court order. Yeah. I mean, it's outrageous.
And what remedies are being sought? What's the hopeful outcome here?
So the statement of claim is claiming $50,000 in damages, and that's for damages of breach of charter rights and other damages for pain and suffering and mental distress, so on and so forth.
Now, this is something that folks right across this province have been waiting to hear. It's the sort of judicial version of retribution, I suppose, to an extent. Not malicious retribution, but seeking justice for these people who have been through so much and have sort of endured the hammer of the law unjustly for this past period of time. What does this case mean, being, I believe, one of the first cases like this for other people across the province? I know virtually all the lawyers who've been working on cases like this is the next angle they're considering. Does this contribute? Does this set the standard, set the bar for other legal action that may take place?
It's an excellent question. From a Justice Centre standpoint, our focus is on seeking court declarations that laws or government policies are unconstitutional, that they're unjustified violations of charter freedoms. Thankfully, there are other lawyers outside of the Justice Centre that do sue for damages. We typically don't. This would be an exception. Mm-hmm. But I would be hopeful that other lawyers in Alberta will sue for damages to the extent that that's possible. I've not specifically researched, how does it work if a law is declared to be invalid? Can you sue the government over damages suffered under that law? That's a big legal question. That would probably be the first legal question that would need to be answered in these court actions, is whether it's even possible to seek those kinds of damages. This is not seeking damages because of the lockdowns being unjust. This is specifically about a wrongful, totally unjustified arrest, totally unjustified imprisonment, when both Alberta Health Services and the Calgary Police Service had all the information available and chose to do the wrong thing.
Can you guys share maybe why Jason Kenney gets a free pass and you're arresting pastors across the province? Any comment, any emotion for this family whatsoever? No, you're just going to drive off just like that. Is this why you became a police officer?
No, sir, I did not. Have a good day.
Well, we are looking forward to an update. Grateful to have folks like the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms tackling these important issues. Otherwise, so many of these people just would have been overpowered by the government. I don't think they expected the level of support, the level of pushback, and the work of incredible organizations like yours. So, John Carpay, thank you so much for everything you do and for always being willing to join us for an update. And for everyone at home, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Sose.
Well, it is certainly wonderful news that folks like Pastor Tim Stevens have not only had their charges acquitted, but that they are now taking legal action and seeking damages for the wrongful imprisonments that they endured. Unfortunately, in other parts of the country, things are not looking quite so optimistic. Folks like Tamara Leach, who took on critical roles in the Freedom Convoy, they are still in for the legal fights of their life. Fortunately, they are not alone. The Democracy Fund has agreed to crowdfund the legal defense for Tamara Leach. And if you want to support her, you can chip in at helptamara.com.